Alrighty, I'm here and I'm queer. It's time for episode 19 of the HDA All-Star Analyses. And here we get to Fauna. Fauna hails from the Season 5 Championship Alaskan Articunos. She is a Desolate Land Leafeon, armed with V-Create, Pyro Ball, Nuzzle, and Encore. Desolate Land on Leafeon does primarily... Well, it primarily does this, because it turns Fauna into the only Pokemon that attacks with grass and fire as stabs. Yes, fire isn't technically part of Leafeon's typing, but with the Desolate Land boost, it's effectively stab. So, we can do stuff with that. And where do we start? We start with the other V-Create spammer that gets a basically stab boost on it and has a pretty similar attack stat, Victini. What is one of Victini's most widely known sets? Choicing it. So, choicing is far from the only thing Fauna can do. It can run a gigantic range of items, but for the sake of this, let's assume we are running choiced Fauna right now with Solar Blade, V-Create, Pyro Ball, and Baton Pass. A fun thing about Desolate Land is on top of providing the stab boost to V-Create and Pyro Ball, which are Fauna's two mains of fire-type damage, it also inherently pumps her grass-type damage output by allowing her to use Solar Blade instead of Leaf Blade, which is a 35 base power upgrade, and nearly another instance of stab on Leaf Blade. It's a really solid power upgrade, and leads Fauna to be incredibly useful on this front. Additionally, Fauna is a pretty solid switch-in to most bulky waters because physical grasses, and especially physical electrics, as talked about in my X-ray video, don't tend to be great Scald switch-ins, but Leafeon, or Fauna specifically in this case, just has a straight immunity because the Scalds evaporate under the Desolate Land. So, with your choice of either Choice Band or Choice Scarf Fauna, the primary set ends up being Solar Blade, V-Create, some third, and some fourth. Typically the third ends up being Pyro Ball, so you can have flexibility in your fire moves, but the fourth is really where things start to really get interesting, because for as great as Grass Fire coverage is, most of Fauna's other parts of her move pool are pretty lackluster. On the physical side, your coverage options are like, what, knockoff Iron Tail? It's not that great. I mean, knockoff handles something like a Dragapult, and it can really chunk Lotties, specifically things that are weak to it, but it's not as useful of a move as you'd think. Although it is also nice for certain fires. And X-Scissor comes for grasses. You just Pyro Ball those with the Desolate Land boost. So it's not really anything notable. Iron Tail isn't too great because most Iron Tail targets are either Solar Blade, V-Create, or Fairies, which, you could V-Create those too. But yeah, Fauna's move pool is strangely poor considering how great the fire and grass coverage is. Yes, Fauna does have Nuzzle, which means for especially Pokemon like Dragonite that can threaten potential sweeps, Dragonite comes in on Fauna, gets nuzzled, and that would be incredibly detrimental to its capabilities as doing really whatever it wants to do, whether it's doing Dragon Dance stuff, being a little bitch of a wall, or just Choice Band. Whatever the hell Dragonite does, Paralysis can inherently aid your team in handling it, so in that case with Nuzzle, Fauna becomes a pretty solid support poke. But we'll get to the support poke stuff later. For now, what if you don't want to choice your Fauna? What if you don't want to lock it into Scarf and get like V-Create to drop your own speed and then get revenge killed like one of the easiest Scarfers to revenge kill in the universe? Since you're dropping your own speed, you're dropping your own defense, pursuit stuff happens, and shit hits the fan really fast. Well, if you don't want to choice it, you can always just not. Because Fauna has inherent access, or natural access rather, to Swords Dance, which, while typically not that useful because you just want to be hitting stuff out the gates with Fauna, and she's not the hardest thing to kill in return due to poor special defense problems. Swords Dance is something that needs to be respected as one of Fauna's options. With Swords Dance applied, V-Create isn't really the greatest move of choice, as Fauna would rather just be straight clicking, well, not moves that drop her speed. So, with Swords Dance, Pyro Ball, Solar Blade, and honestly, this is a personal little bit there of including Endurance, a Lackberry, because I'm a unjustifiedly large fan of that. But it's really whatever you want. Or if you even drop Swords Dance in general and just run an attacker that doesn't get choice locked and can sort of pick its targets as it needs to. I mentioned earlier Fauna's move pool problems, which, yes, those get relevant, and it means that fires, and especially dragons, tend to mess Fauna up pretty bad. But what if there was a Fauna set that didn't, all out offensive everything? What if there was a Fauna set that wanted to focus a bit more on, the defensive aspects of the grass type and 130 defense? This thing is only 10 less defense and the same HP stat as Skarmory. Fauna could do some stuff. What if I wanted to exploit this? This little move, Synthesis. Synthesis essentially grants Fauna's third main set. We went over choice, we went over non-choiced attacker, and now we get to physical wall. You're never going to get anywhere by investing in Fauna's special defense, but with physical defense, you can definitely do things with that. Most physical attackers could slot on Flamethrower and absolutely destroy Fauna, especially due to how she compounds her own fire weakness. But with a boatload of physical investment and Synthesis, meaning this will heal you for 66%, so you can't just 2-hit KO, you have to do quite a remarkably large amount of damage. And you're not running Wish anyway, because even if you could manage to pass a Wish, it's not a very big one coming off of Fauna. You'd rather just want Synthesis because it heals for a lot more. Yeah, past Synthesis, Physical Wall Fauna really just does whatever it wants. Like, it could click Leech Seed if it wants. Oh, shit, I dropped Synthesis. Didn't mean to drop Synthesis. So you can have Leech Seed if you want. You can still utilize your main attacks, like Solar Blade and Pyro Ball, and just have Synthesis in the back, ready to heal 66 whenever you need it. You can even run this on, like, an attacker set, and just have Solar Blade, Pyro Ball, Nuzzle, Synthesis, and a decently offensive spread, because Synthesis just goes that far in maintaining Fauna's capability to live, and especially helps against Hazard Chip, because you can afford to heal from a lower health point, because Synthesis heals you for more than you're typically used to. Most Pokemon don't have immediate 66% recovery moves that they don't need to do any setup for. Or that doesn't differ based on opponent, unless you're fighting like a Primordial Sea hack captain, in which case, shit on. Yeah, I believe this is essentially Fauna. I know there are 3 people in voice call with me, but 2 of them have been muted this entire time. Any other comments?
Let's see. Yeah, like, Fauna is a good mon. Just curious, when would it ever use Encore?
When would it ever use Encore? Mostly on, like, a thing that, if it switches in on a slower Earthquake. Okay, hold up, Mudsdale, do you have, like, fire moves? Fuck, you don't have fire moves. I need a ground type, a slow ground type that is like Flamethrower. Okay, never mind, I got it. So, the instance where Fauna would most use Flamethrower is probably in the interaction with Landorus Therian, because Fauna would switch in on an Earthquake, and then Encore the Landorus, into earthquaking again, so that it doesn't get sludge bombed, weather balled, or U-turned on. And now Fauna can sort of do what it needs to. It can synthesize if it wants to, without risk of getting turned on. You can just throw out an attack on the pretty forced switch. So you can nuzzle it, toxic it, throw out a solar blade or a pyro ball, which, yes, solar blade, it's really nice that Fauna has this option open to it. That's essentially what Encore is used for, coming in on especially earthquakes and forcing earthquakes to continue to be used.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you cannot necessarily burn this thing.
Well, you can, like, Will-O-Wisp it with your fire type. That tends to be your Fauna check anyway.
Then it just heal bells, and then you're
True.
done.
You can heal bell with Fauna. That is an option. Although it doesn't end up being brought because... Okay, Fauna isn't really strapped for slots, but sometimes you just want to do other things than heal bell with
It
Fauna.
kinda has the 4 MSS, kinda.
Yeah, it's a weird combination between sometimes it has 4 move slot syndrome, and sometimes it has poor move pool syndrome. Where sometimes it wants more moves than it can... Where sometimes it wants more moves than it can bring, and other times it brings more moves than it really needs.
Yeah.
That's just how things go with evolutions and Fauna in general. Or Fauna specifically and evolutions in general. Fauna's not really an exception to that evolution rule because it only really got hacked one type of coverage because Nuzzle doesn't really count as an attacking option because it doesn't output that much damage. Only counts as an attack for the sake of being immune to taunt. So yeah, Fauna is extremely interesting by virtue of being the first fire plus grass stab attacker in the format, and it's really the only one that attacks with those stabs. If you can get past Fauna's problems, she's capable of outputting great damage and doing awesome amounts of work, because grass plus fire isn't really a thing most Pokemon are prepared for. However, popular dragons and semi-popular fires are always going to be there to check Fauna, to limit Fauna. Wait, this reminds me. Well, I was going to end the video there, but I forgot one crucial aspect of Fauna's game. The one thing that really makes Fauna capable of bypassing its checks depending on the matchup.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it has Natural Gift. I just didn't select a format, so cut moves are banned. Or cut moves are not banned in the HDA. So you are capable of running Natural Gift. Utilizing, for the sake of, let's say, hitting a Charizard, a Mickleberry, which turns this into a one-time use Stone Edge, or an Apricot Berry, which will turn it into a one-time use Earthquake. Fauna is very capable of bypassing its checks by nature of Heat Tech, which, you know, I don't want to say even further boosted by the sun, but you can expect Fauna, the Desolate Land poke, to bring the heat. Badumts. And that's where I'm ending it, because I don't want to wait for everybody to cringe at my jokes. See ya, bye-bye!